Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's session, which is an Oxford Insight session on two very burning topics at the moment, and the topics which are there for the future and are which are shaping our industry as well, which is ESG and sustainable financial strategy and sustainability reporting and ESG data management program. Well, I am Sehaj and I welcome you all to this session. I am part of Saïd Business School and University of Oxford, the program team. And I am personally excited for this specific session because, as I mentioned earlier, like this is the industry which is rapidly evolving, and this is something which organizations and each and every department is also getting impacted and reshaping our future. So we have a fantastic presentation ahead and a very engaging session ahead for all of you all. So to start off, two quick things from a housekeeping perspective. First and foremost, this session will be recorded. So in case anyone misses out or anyone wants to go back on this session and touch upon the key highlights of the same, so the recording will be shared and will also be available on YouTube as well to access. Along with that, we do have a very global cohort today with us present in this specific session. So we have our Q&A as well as our chat with us. In the chats, we would love to hear from you all. So if you can all put in your name, which country you're joining from, and what exactly is the area of sustainability or this specific session or the industry in general that majorly excites you or you are working in, we would love to hear that. Along with that, the Q&A option is also available wherein you can put in your questions, and our team is very much actively monitoring that, and we'll try to answer whichever questions we can answer there itself, or at the end of this session we are also going to be taking questions which are highly relevant for our panelists and along with me, and then we will be answering that at the end of the session. Okay, so we have a fantastic panel today with us. That is Jason Hamilton and Anjali Patel. I will pass it on to first you, Jason, if you can quickly introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you so much, and it's wonderful to have so many of you all join us, and looking forward to spending the next few minutes with all of you talking through ESG and hopefully share some context with you. As you'll see there, I'm an associate fellow at Saïd and also head tutor on both of these programs, and we'll talk more about that a bit later. But I also had the privilege of help design and build some of these. So hopefully I can address a lot of your questions and concerns.
Thanks a lot, Jason. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Over to you, Anjali, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Anjali Patel. I am the Associate Director of ESG Reporting at AICPA in SEMA. It's great to see that you are all coming from every corner of the world. It's really neat to see. But for those who are not familiar, AICPA and SEMA serve over 580,000 accounting and finance professionals, including members, candidates, and registrants by providing leading guidance and resources, as well as designations, certifications, and credentials. We actually have a strong partnership with Oxford School of Business from both the academia side as well as industry in terms of developing programs and offering continuing education. Just for geography, I am based in North Carolina in the US and lead our internal ESG initiatives, including everything from strategy to execution and to reporting. So it's great to be here today.
Thank you very much, Anjali. I think people will be delighted to obviously hear perspective of you as well as from Jason, both from an academic perspective and as well as from actually being into the program, and that too in both of our programs that are there. So I think that will be a highly insightful session and highly engaging understanding that we will be having from you both. Okay, so talking about the agenda of this entire discussion, so this is not going to be a very typical, information sharing kind of session. It will be a highly interactive one. So definitely because this particular industry of ESG and sustainability, it's more about the perspective side of things. So definitely we will be having an understanding from Anjali with regards to her experience in the program and first-hand experience in the industry, as well as from Jason being part of multiple of our cohorts, being part of one of the people who's teaching in our program as well. And along with in between, we'll also be having a lot of interaction with all of you as well, to understand your own perspectives and the work that you are doing. So this is going to be a very highly engaging and a very interacting session, rather than only an information session that is there. So, to start off with, Saïd Business School and University of Oxford. So, why that in the first place? So, obviously, none of those require any kind of introduction. We all know about University of Oxford and its 900 plus years of legacy in the education space, and how it has shaped the entire globe, and each and everything from like governments to corporates to large scale organizations. Also, recently, in the last 10 years, Oxford has also been ranked number one for the last 10 consecutive years by Times Higher Education University rankings. And even in the recent 2025 ranking as well, it stood first. And same with Saïd Business School, which is the business school associated with University of Oxford, has been ranked second as per the latest Financial Times Executive Education ranking. Along with that, we have a very strong global cohort of 50,000 plus e-alumni over the years that have been part of the Oxford and Saïd Business School community, joining us from 200 plus countries and from various walks of life, coming together as part of our family. And also, we have a 92% plus passing ratio, which is another industry breaking record for our particular executive education programs. So, without wasting any time, let's jump directly into the programs. And with I think the biggest question that everyone has in their mind, that what exactly are these two programs, and why are they actually two programs in the first place? So here I think people would love to hear from you, Jason, if you can, give us an understanding that firstly, why exactly do we have these two programs in the first place, and what is exactly the difference between both of them? So over to you, Jason.
No, sure. Thank you. And I think it's a very fair question. I'll start out at a slightly higher level and hopefully also share some practical insights into this, albeit time being limited. I think the one is, as it says in the name, ESG and financial strategy. And then the other one is, you see in the name there too, reporting and management. I think so that in itself already starts splitting it by saying the one is more strategically focused, probably positioned on a, let's call it leadership executive level, probably organizational wide, giving you a view of sustainability and what that entails. And it's way broader than just the E, the S, and the G. And that's why sustainability in its broader sense is positioned in the program. And we launched that one first, and very, very quickly saw that there's additional need for delving in a little bit deeper. And I say deeper in that it's deeper from an operational perspective. And this is where the second program, the sister program, then got developed, which we've also had the pleasure of now running a few times, where we focus more on the reporting, the frameworks, the standards, the guidelines on a global scale. And then looking at from a implementation perspective, again, also guiding our participants in how best to approach this. And then there we focus on, and we'll talk about it later too, but we look at the details of what's the impact on your organization, your area, but then also looking at the assurance, how to choose effective partners, etc. I think what's important between these is that I think it's valuable to do both programs because you need that strategic focus, and that strategic lens, I think, no matter where you are in the organization, because ESG and sustainability isn't just about climate. It isn't just about the environment. It's very much a business model, a strategy, and a leadership question. And I think both of these programs provide you with a framework or toolkit for an executive or leader to navigate the complexities of business better. And I think that's fundamentally where as Oxford, where we come from, and as CIMA. It's the challenges CIMA also saw with the challenges that executives and their members face. So I think from that perspective, both have that framework. And again, like I said, the one is more operational at its core, and the one is more strategic. But my view is no matter which one you do first, I would recommend you also do the other one, and hopefully you'll see the value in that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jason. That really clarifies the difference between both the programs and what exactly both the programs touch upon. Anjali, I think people will love to hear your perspective on the same since you have been a part of both our programs. So, like overall, what was the difference that you found in both the programs and how did it like impact you?
Yeah, so I took the strategy course, I think the fall of 23, and then I took the data management course just this past summer. And for me personally, that just worked out really well because this role that I'm in just kind of took shape in 2022. And I don't see a lot of people from the US, but especially in the US, the concept of corporate sustainability and that function residing within finance is relatively new. And so for me, I didn't know where to begin. I didn't have experience in it. I was looking for courses, and I couldn't find much at all. And then so this kind of was not only a course, but it was an entire program that really forced me to look at this concept of sustainability and corporate sustainability and what it meant for my organization in terms of really applying concepts and forcing me into applying those into my own organization. So I got a lot of benefit from starting with the strategy course, understanding who my key stakeholders are, trying to kind of work from that influence perspective and getting that management buy-in. And then the operational, the data management was really, kind of how to do the work.
Thanks a lot, Anjali. I think that's really insightful and like how these programs basically shape the basics of you getting into the industry, and they were the first go-to programs for you to build upon that.
Yes.
Okay, so moving on further, another very, I would say the second most important question that we get a lot asked is that who exactly should join which kind of program and who are the basically people who benefit most out of it. So maybe, Jason, if you can touch upon, since you have been part of multiple cohorts, what exactly are the kind of people that you find in the Sustainable Financial Strategy program and similarly in the reporting one? And who do you think benefit most out of it?
I think that's a very large question. So I will also say there that we see a lot of people that have been tasked with ESG or sustainability for their organization or their team, or being challenged by the complexity that they face with it, and they then tend to come on the program either from a personal perspective or then being sent by their companies. And this is across the board, from operations to finance or to support functions, and then also from an expo perspective. Currently, it has been heavily skewed towards finance professionals or people with financial background, so that we also see. But I think from a seniority perspective, mostly always middle, senior to very senior executives from all around the world. I think, as we saw today from the attendees as well, it's always a global cohort. There's always at least 10 to 15 nationalities or countries represented, which again makes the learning environment very, very rich. From who should attend, and again, this is back to my question where I don't see this as just a ESG program. This is very much, in my view, aligned to a much broader view of value creation, about resilience and robustness of your business, and it becomes a strategy, leadership, and business model innovation discussion, risk and opportunities. So for me, I think this is really valuable for actually anybody in the organization from that point of view as part of your learning journey. But like I said, we tend to see people that are tasked for the first time or being given a task that come on this, which again also gives that, not that we just impart knowledge to them or give them frameworks to apply to think and navigate this, but I think the cohort itself also becomes a great learning environment. I know we're touching on this a bit later, but the in cohort sharing and learning and the relationships that built beyond that, I think becomes also very valuable, which is a key benefit of executive education. It's not just about the content. It's about that relationships you build.
Absolutely, I think, yeah, Jason, that is very much true, and especially with the Oxford programs, the diversity is the major aspect of things, not just from a nationality perspective, but also from various organizations and even various departments of organizations.
And
So I think,
sorry, I'll just interject and
yeah,
I'll
yeah, I was
add
just
in
coming to
terms
you.
of intended audience and who should take the course. I've had folks across HR and strategy and like our regional business development folks, essentially kind of to Jason's point, anyone and everyone across the organization taking this course and or either of these programs or both. And it's just been really interesting to see their perspective as well, because their insights are often very different than mine.
Yeah, absolutely. And like follow up to that, Anjali, if you can share your specific, stories from your specific cohort, what kind of people that you, as you mentioned, that you found even people from HR and all. So maybe if you can elaborate, like what kind of people did you find in both the cohorts that you had joined, and how exactly was it different, and even for you also specifically, how did that kind of networking and that kind of cohort impacted?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of these programs is that you can interact as little or as much as you want to. So there's nothing forced, but there's that opportunity. And if I recall, in both cohorts, there were folks from all levels of seniority, all geographies, all industries, and from the geographical perspective, it's just really interesting to hear where we all are in our journeys. You can tell that some are just very new and their challenges are very different than some of the others. So I think it was a good opportunity to kind of see from their perspective, especially because in the US, a lot of these like corporate sustainability teams are small and often just one person. And so like myself, and so it's really hard to kind of form that network.
Thanks a lot, Anjali. I think that is very insightful and helped everyone in getting an understanding which program is the best fit for whom. Okay, so moving on. So now here I would like to open the floor to everyone who has joined. So we have a poll here, which you will be seeing on your screens in a short while. Yes. So what is what is your primary or motivation for joining a sustainability or ESG focused program? We have four options. First is what is your to strengthen my expertise in sustainable finance and investment decisions. Second is to master ESG reporting standards and data management. Third is to enhance my career prospects in the growing sustainability ESG field. And the final one is to help my organization meet rising regulatory and stakeholder expectations. Okay, so there was a close competition in between, but we can see that the third option is the one that most of the people are more aligned with, which is to enhance my career prospects in the growing sustainability and ESG field. And even on a personal level, I completely align with that because this is a field which is very rapidly evolving and which is like very rapidly changing, and it is very important to be up and in line with that. And maybe over to you, Anjali, if you can share your own personal experience, like what was your motivation behind both the programs, like what exactly drove you to them?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on this earlier, but yeah, I'm happy to share my motivation. I think the main things were, one, it was essentially a new field for me. So I have a CPA background, so all just accounting in your traditional kind of financial statement perspective of accounting, and so I had never really entered the sustainability field. And so I was a team of one. I was just kind of, given this opportunity. I took it. I really needed some guidance, and there wasn't much out there at the time. And again, what I really like about this program is it's comprehensive. You take it at your own pace, but it's like a nice balance of providing structure because, and I know that you'll get into this more, but in terms of like the weekly cadence and the weekly modular releases, and they all build upon each other. And so you're forced to kind of stay on track, but you still have a little bit of flexibility in terms of where you can devote your time in a given week to take the course. So I really like the structure of it. It definitely forced me to, again, take the concepts and implement it into my own organization. And, we are a non-for-profit, service-oriented, member serving organization. And so a lot of times when you think of sustainability, and specifically the E component, you're like, well, does this apply to me? I don't distribute anything. I don't manufacture anything. And one of the big things I took away was that, it definitely applies to everyone in every industry and every geography. And so this forced me to really look at the concepts and kind of immerse myself in involved with, peers across geographies and industries, and really kind of show how it can apply to my organization.
Thank you very much, Anjali, for sharing your personal experience about joining both the programs. Okay, so yes, moving on to the very first program. So how exactly does the learning rhythm of the program looks like? So first program that we are going to be touching upon is the ESG and Sustainable Financial Strategy program. Just to give an overall context, it is a 7 weeks program wherein you have to dedicate about 7 to 10 hours on a weekly basis, and modules are released every Wednesday as per the university guidelines. Okay, so here I think Jason, I will pass it on to you to, like, if you can quickly give us all an understanding as to how exactly the learning journey of a person looks like, and how exactly the weeks are divided. If you can, like, briefly take us through the journey of it.
Sure. And I think it's important to understand this, although obviously anybody coming onto the program will, once they work through it, will obviously have a much better understanding. But I think, yes, 7 weeks. The first week is used for orientation to get familiar with each other. And we also normally have a live session at that point in time. And I think the live sessions are also important because there's a weekly tutorial or live session where we get to engage in person or online, but in real time, and ask questions and debate. So I think just at a very high level, from a program flow perspective, we start off in module 1 by really looking very broadly and saying what's happening in the world of sustainability. And I don't want to give anything away here, but we set the scene very broad to show that it's not just about reporting and complying and legislation and regulation. Sustainability is actually a much broader framework, and it's important context to have. And we then in module 2 move to say, okay, how do we start making sense of this environment? Now that we know there's this complexity we face, how are we going to navigate this best? And this is where I'm saying it becomes a leadership toolkit on how do I navigate better? How do I make better decisions? But we then start to providing you with some thinking, and you see there, we talk about purpose, we talk about stakeholders, and we start introducing those concepts of value creation and what that then means for the organization. And then beyond module 2, when we look at module 3, module 4, module 5, we really delve into the detail then and say, okay, now that you've got this framework, we start looking at particularly what this means for decision makers. And you'll see there from a financial perspective, how investors look at it, how stakeholders approach it, what demands are there on the business. And we also, again, delve deeper into this view of risk and opportunity, which I think is an important one because it all links to value creation and what value means. And we then look at, only in module 4, we actually get to the various standards and frameworks and principles and the various legislation and regulations. And then we delve into a bit more detail beyond that, and then it culminates in module 6, where we really look at your role within this, so you as a leader within this, and it really becomes about this organizational transformation then. So the work you would have done the last 6 weeks over the 6 modules, each week there's an assignment due, but all that culminates into your final module where you get to put it all together. That is very bespoke. There's set questions you answer, but how you do that organizational wise, project-wise on a particular area, it's really up to you, and we grade along with that. But you really walk away with a plan. You can well, obviously you have to work on this more beyond the program because it's only 6 weeks, but you've got a plan you can work with that you can take back to the office, and actually implement or have a enhanced discussion. As we've seen, many people are positioned or required to drive this in their organization, but they have to get internal and external buy-in or education before they even do that. And this transformation plan, in many cases, has been the building blocks for that. So again, I think very, very impactful. And I know we'll get to the other program now, but I think what's also important is, again, from a decision-making perspective, we try to provide you with the toolkits to help you think in a better way, and ultimately through that make better decisions on a consistent basis while navigating all the challenges you face, but sustainability challenges. We're not trying to make you into the best consultant out there. And I think that's something also important, that there's an academic angle to this. There's a content angle to it where we provide you with information, but we're trying to develop you as an individual to show up best you can in your organization or any situation you actually face with a better framework or better mindset or better methodology to apply.
Thank you very much, Jason. I think it was a really good overview of the entire program, and everyone got a very good understanding, especially from a practicality aspect, like what exactly the frameworks, and especially the last project that everyone will be working on from an actual deployment perspective. Anjali, I know I'll be putting you in a spot here since you've done the program long back, but like I think people will love to hear from you as to which was the module that you felt was the one that most resonated with you and impacted you the most in your learning journey.
I guess I would probably say the final module, and the only reason I say that is because, so just specific to the strategy program, the first one, it's extremely unique in that it requires, Jason spoke of the transformation plan. It requires you to start it as early as the first module and build upon it module by module, week by week. And it was really interesting to me to see it all come together. So that final module, you bring it all together into one package, and then it's kind of like a light bulb moment, because that's the plan and that's the package that I essentially presented to my COO, my CFO, my strategy team, and my HR team. And so again, everything that Jason said in terms of, this helped me start the discussions that I needed to in order to get that internal buy-in.
Thank you very much, Anjali. Really delighted to hear that you were actually able to immediately use all the skill sets and the learnings that you had got from the program in your work. Okay, so now let's move on to the second program, which is the Sustainability Reporting and ESG Data Management Program. It is also from a program perspective, a 7 weeks program. The learning time is also very much on a similar side, 7 to 10 hours, along with the modules releasing time and day. So again, over to you, Jason, if you can, give us a quick overview about what exactly this program touches upon from an like week on week perspective, and obviously like without giving out much of the program in detail.
I think the only reason I don't want to go too much into the actual nuances of each module is you can see it online, and we've got them live here now. So I want to try and add what's not necessarily on the website or can be shared in the slides. I think this program, now that you've seen the first one, module 4, as I said, goes into the frameworks and regulation and legislation. And in theory, this program, the reporting and ESG data management, is delving into that module in more detail, taking that deeper, with a bit of nuance. It's not quite just going that. There's more to it. But I think in essence, in what we do here, we also set the scene, and then very quickly in module 1, module 2, and module 3, go into the legislation, the regulation, and the various challenges around that. And we look at it from a global perspective. And again, the reason for that is, and there are some regional nuances that play out, But from a global perspective, there's certain key themes that have emerged, and there's these things are always moving, but we try and focus on those bigger trends around that. So we look at IFRS, we look at ISSB, and then we also look at the EU standards, and there's a few tail ends of that with some of the again, a lot of these things sort of form under one depending on where it happens. But we also then take a future looking view about where this is going. Once we have a good understanding of the reporting, we then delve into, for lack of a better word, the how do I do this? What am I now going to do now that I have a deeper understanding of this? And this is where module 4, 5, and actually 6 then come in, where we have that opportunity to talk about and look at what is good governance, what is good control systems and monitoring systems to have in place. And you'll see here too that becomes very much a discussion, not so much about reporting, and this is something I say on the program often. We can only measure and disclose things we actually do. And if we're not doing anything, we're not running our business effectively, we cannot report anything, or what we do report is going to be viewed very adversely. So this is an exercise on transparency, which again links to a lot of frameworks we already apply in business practices, and we show how those link. And then we move on from that perspective as well by saying, if I take this information that I am now monitoring and gathering, what information should I gather? Have I been gathering that I'm not using as effectively? What should I be gathering based on the guidance? And how can I use this effectively for better decision making? And yes, the tail end of that is then it ultimately becomes enabling you to then report and disclose. But it's really, again, about how do I set up my business? How do I manage my internal, my external stakeholders and environment to run my business effectively, to ultimately be able to report and disclose and then assure. And we take you through what that also looks like, about how to work with partners, what to outsource, how to outsource it, the risks, the challenges with that, how to choose, because in a lot of these cases you have to potentially work with external parties, but what's a framework to apply and how to assess that? How do you manage those relationships? And this is what we in essence do, a little bit in 4, but definitely in 5 and actually in 6 as well. And then with module 6, again, we bring it all together, where we again talk about you as the leader. What are you going to do in your area of influence, up or down? But also then close out that links that you can walk away with a plan for you to go implement and work with. I think one thing I also want to mention, and maybe it comes a bit later, but I think a lot of people that come onto programs in general is sometimes very intimidated by the fact that there's going to be assessments. I think we must remember that the assessments is there, that you have the first opportunity in a very safe environment to play around with the content, to apply it in a way, and then customize it in your environment. And from that perspective, I think there's a lot of flexibility within that, because it isn't as simple as right or wrong. It's based on your experience by applying the learnings. So I don't want to say it's difficult to fail the program, but it's, if you put in the work, apply critical thinking and show insight, you will probably do okay. This is not an undergraduate program. It's an executive education program. And I think many of us who haven't studied for a long time, that's sometimes a concern. So don't let that be a concern. This is your first time to play around with things, sense check things with us, sense check things with your peers, before you actually take this back to the office and obviously work with this further. But in essence, that's what the reporting and ESG data management program is about.
Thank you very much, Jason, and really like the practical insights and actually the impact that people will be having, and also from the like projects perspective as well. Although yes, we'll be touching upon this later on, but this is something that comes up a lot in our discussions as well with people, that how the assignments and all are to be managed. Okay, so moving on to you, Anjali, if you can, give us an overall understanding, like which module did you found the most impactful one, and like what was your practical experience in this?
Yeah, sure. I think I don't remember which module, but I think it was helpful to, especially because things are changing constantly and rapidly. It was helpful to get that overview of the various standard setters, the various initiatives, and kind of where we are today, because it's hard to keep up with the whole alphabet soup. The other thing was I appreciated the introduction and the content around AI, because again, that is a new and fast-paced concept that will 100% impact ESG and will, I think, be very beneficial. And in terms of, we just have to kind of figure out, the opportunities that are out there and how to kind of take advantage of it from that standpoint. So I appreciated that insight in the second program.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you
I
very
just want
much,
to add.
Anjali.
I just want to add a
Yes.
point to that. Actually, I think one thing we see, and this is not this program specific or isolated to this, but big data has been a big thing. But I think with AI coming, or AI being there now, bolting those things together, we have so much information available, and actually not information, data, points of reference available that we can now measure. The question is, what are we measuring and why? How do we now make sense of all this information we actually have access to, and all these trends we can identify? How do we make sense of that and enable us, again, back to this point of better decisions? How do I assimilate this to ask the right questions, look at the right data points, specifically in this environment where we've got so much information to now actually work with? And again, this is something we also then look at specifically from the latest developments within that. And I think, as I'm alluding to, this goes beyond just the technical side of it. It goes about that leadership element. How do I lead this? How do I position this in my organization? And in many cases, how do I champion this? Because in many cases, you'll be one of the first people that will actually do this for your organization.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jason and Anjali. Okay, so we would love to hear from everyone present. So you will be seeing a poll on your screen in a short while. Okay, so what is the biggest challenge your organization faces in advancing its sustainability agenda? So we have four options. Very first is integrating sustainability into financial decisions. The second one is collecting and managing reliable ESG data. Third is meeting evolving reporting and regulatory requirements. And the final one is meeting evolving reporting. Sorry, is it? Oh, sorry, I think it's the same one. Okay, so we'll go within three options. Okay, so there is a strong, so there's a strong, in fact, with all the three of the options, there's a strong, okay, so integrating sustainable, collecting and managing reliable ESG data seems to slightly go forward as compared to integrating sustainability into financial decisions. Well, yes. So here are the results for the same. So it is a very close competition between integrating sustainability into financial decisions as well as collecting and managing reliable ESG data. But collecting and managing reliable ESG data is slightly on a higher side, with around 40% of the people voting for the same. And I think, Anjali, like people will love to hear your own perspective, that what do you feel, since you have been into this industry for a good amount of time and have been working very closely in this field. So what do you think is the biggest challenge, and are you aligned with what people have voted for towards?
Yeah, so I guess I would have changed that first option slightly, in that my biggest challenge was, and kind of remains today, is to integrate sustainability strategy into our overall strategy, instead of just solely financial decisions. And because the second, I think, option was related to data, but like I don't know what data I need. I don't know what data, how to collect it or what that data is going to look like until and unless I can integrate that sustainability strategy into our overall strategy. So I'd say that for sure was our biggest challenge, or my biggest challenge. I think, being in the US, we've had really, really challenging geopolitical differences amongst our stakeholders. And in this current administration, there's been so much pushback and drawbacks to any sort of climate or overall sustainability. If you think of D&I, anything like that, we've just faced a lot of challenges, and we have to kind of keep that in mind in terms of our stakeholders, our administration, executive orders, et cetera. So that in addition to a lack of resource, your typical challenges, lack of resources, competing priorities, the fact that internal sustainability is not necessarily a I mean, it is, but at the face of it, it's not a revenue producing activity. And so it's going to naturally kind of fall down the list of priorities.
Absolutely, yes. And Jason, would you like to add anything to that?
I think it's no surprise that it came out relatively equal across, at least those three. And I think so. I sort of take note of that. The only comment I can make is that by doing these programs, or at least the one program, we try and address that. And as I said before as well, um, there is an element of, although this is in the title, we talk about sustainability and ESG. I think what the modern executive also have to face and is about this overall integration. And a big focus in both programs is that, by saying, how do I integrate sustainability related matters, whether it's regulation, reporting, management, or whatever the case is? How do I integrate that into my organization? It's not something separate. And I think that realization is something big, something we look at on the program. But I think from a corporate perspective, it's very important for organizations to also have that view. And in many cases, we don't have that view. And this is where I think a lot of things go missing or become very, very difficult. And we try and provide that concept about how to actually do that. I think also an element is also back to this value creation idea. Certain terms have been, or certain terms raise certain emotions depending on which legislation you talk about, or even in which jurisdictions you operate. And I think there is this view too, that yes, political environment does have an impact, and it will always have an impact. But it's also just one of the factors we have to consider. So we talk about stakeholders. That's one of them. What about your customers? What about society or suppliers, etc.? We have to think about all of these and then balance that and make a decision that is true to our business. And so if this then becomes this bigger question around what is my organization's strategy? What is my organization's position? What is my organization's values and behaviors? And how do I act in that constraint into the environment I face? And that's also something we then look at, because you cannot necessarily, if you cannot change necessarily your strategy, you can react, but you cannot necessarily change your strategy or your values based on a 4-year political cycle, for example. We have to start thinking bigger than that. It doesn't mean you don't have to manage it. And there's also a thing there about how do I do that? But I'll be very worried if integrity and honesty is on a sliding scale. And I think sustainability becomes a very similar element. And this is where, for me, it comes down to a risk and opportunity discussion about how am I placed as an organization to best take advantage of this, or how best to navigate these challenges.
Thank you very much, Jason. And that's a really unique perspective towards ESG and sustainability for sure. Okay, so moving on. Yeah, so this is how the learning platform looks like. So I'm mindful of the time at the moment, but like just to give everyone an understanding. So the learning platform is very much of a blend of pre-recorded videos as well as live sessions, and you will, as you can see in between all itself, you will have the recorded lectures, you have the transcripts for the same, you can listen to it even at the, like when, for example, you're traveling as well, you can access through that through your phone or even from your or from a laptop, from an iPad. So however you want to do the learning journey, you can take care of that one. Okay, so moving on. So, we will, although we have like briefly touched upon this topic, but like just to quickly take everyone through it. So, the learning experience of Oxford is obviously different, and it's a lot guided by support from your success advisors, and there is a lot of guided learning by our tutors such as Jason, along with a lot of interactive learning, which I mentioned, like for example, your live sessions, your video content, your audio content. Um, so overall, the Oxford learning experience is very much immersive and very much from an learner-centric standpoint. And maybe if Anjali, you can quickly if share some of your perspective on the same, like how exactly do you like the overall learning experience?
Sure. I think one of the best things about this program is that the format is varied. And so you have case studies, you have check-in questions to test your understanding of the content, again, in a very safe environment. You have built-in videos and you have your standard text. So just the content never felt like it was boring to get through. And then there's also options to dig deeper into the content if you're interested and have the time. The other thing that I thought was unique, which I kind of alluded to earlier in this webinar, is that at face value, it may seem like a particular project or application question may not apply to your organization, but this program truly makes you kind of think outside the box and require you to think about sustainability in ways that likely no one else in your organization has thought of. So I really think that this program stands out in that way.
Thank you very much, Anjali, for sharing your own experience on the same. Okay, so we will quickly touch upon how exactly the assignments and assessments part look like, because obviously that is a very integral element that actually boils down to you getting the certification and entering the Oxford ecosystem. So maybe Jason, if you can quickly touch upon both how exactly the marking criteria and assessments looks like for the reporting program as well as for the financial strategy one.
And yeah, they're pretty much very similar for both, in that there's a weekly assignment due based on the content you would have covered. I think what's important to note with that is um, they're probably quite simple questions we ask you, because we ask you to fill in a template or apply one of the frameworks. Um, but it's about that critical thinking that you then need to go do, and what you're honing in on. So like I said, this is the first time in a safe environment where you can experiment and play with the content, and then obviously you get our feedback on it as well when we do grade it. So each of them is set up like that, dealing with each module. And then in the final, as I said, in the final project where you put it together, you have an opportunity to incorporate the work you've done and rework that in enhancing it. What we cover in the final module, which tends to be your sort of next steps and actions. What we tend to look for from the assignment perspective is not just for you to regurgitate the content back to us. We know you have that. If you use ChatGPT, you can summarize it very beautifully, which again, we are very happy you also do. It's a great learning tool. What we want to see is your insight, your critical thinking, challenging yourself, challenging others. And that can only come through by actually thinking about this, engaging with your peers and engaging with people at work. But that's in essence what we need, or what we want to see. And I think also it is only 6 weeks. So it's intense, but it's also only 6 weeks. It goes by very, very quickly. So we understand that this is not a thesis you have to complete. This is applying, learning, showing insight. And that is what we ultimately end up rewarding. As I said, most people don't, very few people fail the program, because it's really about that interpretation, your own experience on this, and assimilating the content, and then working with that beyond.
Thank you very much, Jason. Anjali, would you like to share your experience? How exactly did your assignments and assessments go, and how exactly you liked it?
Yeah, again, I think it does a great job of really not only checking in, after every few slides just to kind of keep you engaged, but also just a comprehensive understanding of the material. I really liked the feedback that I got from my instructors. You could tell that they took the time to read through my analysis and my responses and provide really good feedback in terms of maybe things that I could consider in the future. So yeah, I thought all the assignments and assessments were really well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anjali, for sharing your insights on it. Okay, so obviously, the backbone of Oxford is our faculty. So we have world-class faculty teaching on our programs with Amir as the academic director of both the programs, in fact. And Jason, would you like to add anything on the from the faculties aspect and how exactly the Oxford faculties teach in this specific program?
I think the only maybe comment I want to add, there's maybe two, and it links to the earlier slide as well. I think we mentioned while the program carries on, there's weekly discussion forums where you get to engage via our platform with your fellow peers, and it's in essence live all the time, and that's something we facilitate. So there's a real high level, high touch model there. Additional to that, we've got the weekly live tutorials or live sessions where we get to engage with all the participants that can join us live, where we debate questions that we put forward or that the cohort puts forward. But two of those sessions is also then attended by Amir himself. So he joins us right at the beginning and then also in the middle of the program. I think that's the important one to note because, again, that in-person engagement where you get to hear from him directly, ask him questions, but also hear from him the latest insights about what research is busy with and what the latest findings are, and also the latest developments in ESG. Linked to that, I think what's important, I know there's a snapshot there of a few professors, and I've had the privilege of also working with Joel and with Jonathan, and I think Rob Eccles is quite well known globally for his various work, but also specifically in this space. I think what's important is the breadth of academia that's included. It's definitely not a one-sided view. It's an holistic view of what is currently carrying on from various perspectives. So like I said, Jonathan has got a HR background, but then now focusing on business leadership and alignment. Joel is from an accounting perspective, and again, you see all these things merging. And I think that's probably very important. And then linked to that also, although these are all in theory academics, they're still all from the business school, which also means practical application is very, very key. And this is also where the partnership with SEMA and ICEPA in co-developing these programs is so important. It's research-based, academic rigor is applied, yes, but it's about that real world impact and solving real world problems.
Thank you very much, Jason. And Anjali, I know again, like I'll be putting in your spot here because you've gone through the programs a while back. But any particular session that you like from any of our professors that like really impacted you?
Oh, you totally put me on the spot, and I do not remember names, but I know Jason provided some feedback to some of my exercises. I remember finding that
Oh, that's
valuable.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Mhm.
I want to say, I mean, just on that, on the lighter note, a lot of participants always, when the program happens, the work-life balance and then work-life education or program balance has to happen. But we feel the pain as well because when we're also executives in our personal lives, we're associated with the school with certain obligations, and then on these programs, us as tutors that guide you through the learning have our teaching obligations, but then we also on weekends we have to guide you or grade your assignments. So as all of you struggle with time management, we struggle as well, but it's such an enjoyable process. And I think also to that point around the feedback we can give, the group learning we can give, also becomes, I think, not just rewarding for us, but rewarding to the broader cohort as well.
Thank you very much, Jason. Okay, so another very quick and a very big aspect actually, which we get a lot of time asked that obviously everyone knows about Oxford's expertise from an academic perspective, but what about from an industry standpoint? So we do have global industry experts coming from various of the organizations into this program and sharing their own insights into the same. And maybe Jason, if you would like to add anything that from an industry perspective or like from a guest lecture aspect, what exactly
Sure.
is the impact in our programs?
Yeah, I think the important thing is here too. It's not just academics you hear from. So from a content perspective, it already looks broad, and there's various additional readings also provided for further study beyond the program. But linked to that is also about the case studies, and there's case studies that is definitely globally representative, which also some you work through in during the program, some is for additional reading, and you can see a few here, also just a few people that kind of attend. But I think the case studies is very important, and sometimes there's additional case studies also provided, but it's really providing that what is practically happening on the ground, good and bad, what we can actually show. And it's funny, sometimes we show businesses as an example of what's a good thing to do, and then that same company comes up a little bit later as an example of what is complex to navigate, and where greenwashing might have taken place, which just shows us the duality of what we need to manage and what companies actually face. And I think the sort of the final point, I think from a expert perspective, is there's various videos also from industry experts across, again, from a very diverse background, also giving their input. I forget the total number, but it's quite a big number of industry experts that also give their perspective on the content and then the application of that. And I think that again makes it a very rich learning environment, in addition to the various case studies we then put forward.
Thank you very much, Jason. Okay, so although we have briefly touched upon this in the beginning, but just to highlight, obviously the Oxford ecosystem and the Oxford family is 50,000 plus e-alumni that we have globally from 200 plus countries. And we do also have a lot of offline interactions as well, apart from the ones that Anjali and Jason mentioned, that there are a lot of online groups that we have. We do have a lot of online sessions, live sessions, which are there, but we do have certain offline meetups as well, which are there. And Anjali, like, would you like to share any of your experience from an networking aspect, or like any particular, how exactly the community or like your particular cohort in general?
Yeah, I think like I was kind of saying, I liked that you could kind of go in and out. There was nothing forced in terms of getting together and speaking with your cohort, but you could always go in. And I did notice that, some people were more active than others, and that's just natural in this sort of setting. It was really neat to see others within my organization enrolled in the program, either in my cohort or in future cohorts. I know that for the the strategy program, comparing our PowerPoint presentations, that sustainability transformation plan, hearing it from the perspective of someone in strategy or HR was really different than my perspective. So the more sharing that you're willing and interested in doing, I think the better for everyone.
Thank you very much, Anjali, on sharing your perspective on the same. Okay, so this is the certification that how it looks like. So as you can see, it's certified by Oxford Saïd as well as in collaboration with AICPA and SEMA. Along with this, as we mentioned previously, you do get the access to our e-alumni community as well, along with the additional CPD that you get in this specific program. And maybe Anjali, would you like to add anything in that, like how exactly the certification, impacted you, or like you have that kind of, Oxford backing you? Like, would you like to share anything on that?
Yeah, I think can you put it as a digital certificate on
Yeah, yeah,
LinkedIn?
absolutely. You can
Yeah.
share it on LinkedIn. You
Okay.
can put it as
Yeah,
a
I
digital
think that speaks
certification.
volumes. And I think, again, there's so many 1 hour courses out there on the topic, but this comprehensive program really kind of sets you apart.
Thank you very much. Jason, would you like to add anything?
I think the only comment I can make is, as yes, we all want the certificate, but I think really the co-learning that happens, and the relationships you build, and the relationships you can take forward, that networking is really something that's really, for me, probably the biggest value that a participant takes out of this. And again, being associated with the school, you're part, once you move out of this or successfully conclude the program, you're part of the Saïd Business School community. And as we said, there's various ways to then stay connected. And I know, I think every 2 years there's an in-person reunion as well that people can attend. But you're really part of that broader community. And I've had the pleasure of connecting and staying connected with various participants over the years. And I know that happens privately as well. But having access to that sounding board, and I think this is something you learn over the 6 weeks, is the sounding board, the different perspectives, is such a rare opportunity and a rare glimpse into to have access to, which we don't always have in our organizations. And I think that for me is the real valuable part. And then, of course, we all know that I'm an accountant as well, so I know that I have to get my CPE points and CPD points, and this is a very nice additional thing to have, whether you need it or not. But it's good to know that you can also get that points.
Thank you very much, Jason. Okay, so to apply for the program and for the next steps, so you can book a call with us if you would like to get a more in-person level understanding, and if you would like to understand, like check with respect to your own background, how exactly the program fits in, or if you have any other queries, so you can book a call with us by scanning the first QR code that is there. The starting date for the ESG and Sustainable Financial Strategy program is 28th of January, and for the data management, it is 21st of January. You have the respective QR codes for the same, which you can scan and go ahead and directly enroll yourself. These are open programs, so there is no selection criteria as such. Along with that, we are also, since we are approaching a new year and we would like to support you all in your journey for this program in the coming year, we are also offering a 20% discount for both the programs on their overall program fee. The code for the same is NY20, which you can apply at the time of checkout, and you can avail the 20% discount for the same. Okay, so I am mindful of time here, but I think we have some time to take some quick questions, if that is fine with you, Jason and Anjali. Okay, so let's pull up the Q&A. It's been quite active so far. Okay, so let's see if we can take up some questions.
While you're looking, I see there's one that I just saw that
Sure,
talks
sure, sure. You
about
can take it.
the voluntary. That it's from an anonymous attendee, but it just asked a question about, does it cover the voluntary reporting frameworks? And yes, it does. And I think also, just holistically, we know that there's a lot happening, but we also know that the work around ISSB is also to try and give you this global standard of a base framework to apply. And there's some other things in accounting we also pull in. But yes, it does take that broader view. It's not just looking at what is regulated and legislated. It's looking what the current environment is, and where it's developing to. And I think also just a point on that, disclosing isn't always driven by legislation and regulation. It's driven by what my stakeholders want. So currently you supply and submit reports to the tax authority because, well, they're asking for it and it's regulated. But your staff, your unions, your suppliers might also be asking for information. Your investors, your funders are asking for information. That's not regulated or legislated. That is just them asking and you wanting access to their products, their services, their funding, and then you then disclose. And that's the environment we actually face. That's actually what ESG sustainability really is.
Thank you very much, Jason, for taking up that. Well, there's a very long question, but I would just break it down because there are some interesting questions in that. So one of that is with respect to private sectors. So beyond private sectors, and I think this is something, Jason, if you would like to answer. So beyond private sector partners, what role do governments and regulators play in enabling, supporting, or accelerating the adoption of certain ESG measures?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. That, I mean, I think the role is obviously big because they are driving certain behavior, And then in essence also, if regulators are there setting certain standards or a minimum requirement, at least you're trying to equalize the playing field. And I say equalize the playing field in that if you don't have standard definitions, currently there isn't necessarily, but standard definitions, standard ways of reporting and measuring, you've got a lot of room for interpretation and ultimately misrepresentation, which is exactly what has happened historically. But I think, as I said, it's not just the regulators and the legislators that are driving this. It's really industry actually driving this. It's really your stakeholders and that ecosystem that is driving this. Society, your customers, your evolving customers, and then your competitors. And I think what we've seen also from, and I think that this probably came from COVID, but we saw how interconnected the world really is. So I think even from a supply chain perspective, we know that we have to have a much better view of our supply chain. It's not about one level, it's now 3-4 levels down where a risk factor lies. So I need to care about what's happening with my 4-level down supplier, potentially sitting in Africa or in Asia or in America, and it's not necessarily obvious where that risk or that opportunity lies. And this is the complexity we actually face. So I think it's much broader than that, but legislation and regulators do play a big role. But we'll also see as you work through the program, legislation and regulation will always lag. And I think, as we know now too, if a certain rule comes in, to be able to comply with that, a lot of work has to happen. If you haven't started putting in the work already, you're going to be left behind. And as I said, when you do these programs, you'll gain more and more of this insight. But it goes way beyond legislation and regulation and just reporting. It's about leadership and decision making and value creation for the organization, that we actually think about these things, whether you report on it or not.
Thank you very much, Jason. Just one more question, which I found like is very much repeating is, and also we have I think touched upon, but like maybe if we can deep dive into that. So there's a lot of question about like translating ESG strategy into operational practice and like more from a practicality and like a measurable impact kind of thing is like I think I'm getting a sense that a lot of questions are around that. So maybe if you can touch upon that how exactly this programs helps into
Yeah.
translating this strategy into actual operational practice and like how do we measure that impact in this program?
Yeah, well, I guess in a very short way, in the strategic program module 5, we and 4, but 4 and 5, we start talking about measurement. We start talking about impact and what that actually means, because impact is also about moving the needle, but what needle are you moving and what are you measuring? And I guess this balance between financial and non-financial is the key part. It's quite easy to measure financial metrics, but how do we measure non-financial metrics? And there's various forms of that. It's something we do go into. It's something we do go into even more so in the data management program. But I think a key thing that also comes out is this way of thinking. The frameworks applied, the methodologies applied is to say, here's what's currently happening in the world, but also knowing that this is an area of development and it's actually co-development that's happening because regulators are behind. Organizations, leaders have to forge this and say, this is what we are doing. This is how we can collaborate with our peers, with our stakeholders on how best to navigate this. It's things companies might already be doing because we're already reporting on what is there a good culture in the business? Are we adhering to our values, etc.? How do you measure that? So it's the extension of that we need to start looking at. But it is a challenge. But then again, how well do we manage that? How do we also manage the reputational risk of making a statement, putting a ratio out there or a measure out there and being wrong? But we have to have the confidence that it's okay to have a wrong measurement because it's part of the evolution of what we're actually dealing with. So a lot of this has got to do with this overall management about, I cannot wait to be 100% certain I have to start doing something and having the confidence to put it out there, but then having a very strong strategic view around that about why I'm saying it, how I'm saying it, and how I'm actually communicating.
Thank you very much, Jason. That was really insightful, I think, and that helped that entire space of questions that people have asked. Okay, so I am mindful of time here, so unfortunately, we won't be able to take the questions right now. But I would urge everyone, if you have queries with regards to the program or anything in general around the same, please feel free to book a call with our program team, and we will be able to definitely help you out in resolving all the pending queries, as well as any other questions that you have or you'd like to discuss how this program specifically would be helping you. And just on a final note, Anjali, if you would like to share or just add anything for like any of your colleagues who are just on the fence, like if any particular closing statements you would like to add.
Yeah, I think mainly the fact that, it is structured, so you'll be done with it in the 6 to 7 week period. You do get, I think, a week off or so, and so that kind of helps in terms of planning. It's structured but allows flexibility. It's comprehensive. You build upon the concepts module over module. You've got the peer-to-peer learning, you've got the instructor kind of contact. And so, yeah, I think it's invaluable, especially if you are newer in your journey.
Thank you very much, Anjali. Any closing statements from your end, Jason?
I just want to add to that final comment. I think anywhere where you are in your journey, this program is applicable, whether you already have a well-established strategy, that the environment is so dynamic, whether you're starting out on this journey and you have nothing and you have to start from nowhere, you'll be able to walk away with a better idea and a plan, whether you're a startup, whether you're a global listed corporate. And I know the question always comes up, how does this apply to SMEs? So my point is, yes, this applies to SMEs as well. As with governance, as with financial rules, you still have to pay tax, you still have to do your accounts, whether you are a small business, but you do it proportionally. So these factors, and as I said, it goes beyond reporting. It's about risks and it's about opportunities and about value creation. It's important for all businesses. And this is like I said, in my view, again, it's a leadership and strategy way of thinking that we actually start applying to this that has the benefit of an outcome that we can also report and disclose and assure what we actually do. So I think very appropriate for anybody, no matter where you are on your journey.
Thank you very much, Jason. And again, I would like to thank both of you for joining us today and taking out time for this session. I think it was highly insightful and a lot of things we have covered today, and that clears out a lot of doubts of people. And I think that will actually motivate people to go further in this journey and prepare themselves for the future. So thanks a lot, Anjali and Jason, for joining us today. And also thank you everyone for joining in and to today's session, and hope it was insightful and helpful for all of you all. So, and looking forward to welcoming you to the program in the new year, and happy Christmas and New Year to everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.